Okay. So in the last class, what we have done is we have understood how to make use of a function import concept in OData services. In the last class, we have discussed about like function import concept in OData web services. But the point here is, in the last class, we have created a function import by using a single input parameter. We have used a function import by using a single input parameter. So function import can have one or many input parameters. But in the last class, we have used only single input parameter. And most importantly, I can say we can have multiple function imports. We can have multiple function imports under single service. I mean to say a single service can have one or many functions or function imports. One function import can have one or many input parameters, and single service can have one or many function imports. But in the last class, what we have done, in one service we have created only one function import in the last class. And moreover, that function import is having a single input parameter. In the last class, we have created single service with single function import, and that function import is having a single input parameter. But in today's class, I want to make sure that I want both requirements. For example, I want to use like EMP by country, question mark, country equal to, for example, India here, and I want to use multiple function imports, I want to use multiple input parameters for this function. To use multiple input parameters for this function, you have to use like ampersand here, or you can see this symbol, ampersand symbol. Country equal to India. Country is one of the input parameter here. Ampersand, you can use, for example, salary equal to, for example, 60,000. So this is the function name. This is a function name, and this is the first input parameter, and this is the second input parameter. So input 1, this is value 1, and this is input 2, and this is value 2. So in this way also, in this manner also, we can use a function import. But in the last class, we have written a function import which will accept only single parameter. But now I want to use a function import with multiple parameters like country, salary, or whatever. And in the same service, I want to create one more function. For example, For example, flights by airline. So that is another function import I want to use within the same service. And question mark, for example, something like airline equal to LH or double A. So this is another function name. I want to use it in the same service. And airline is the input one here. And this is its value. So in this requirement, we are going to understand how to use multiple function imports and how to use multiple input parameters for each function. So let me write the intention here. My intention is to explain how to use multiple input parameters for single function import and how to use multiple functions in single service. So these two concepts you will understand after completing this requirement. So first of all, let me go to the last class service here. This is our last class service, Z9 PM Oasis function import project. So this is what we have used. And it contains a function import, EMP by country. EMP by country contains some output configuration, and country is the input here. So this is the input configuration. So now, along with country, I want to add one more function import. So just click on add button here. You can click on change and you can click on add button here. So I'm using, for example, salary, and I want to take, for example, int 64. I'm taking salary with EDM dot int 64 is the data type I'm using. So this EDM dot int 64 is equivalent to what? EDM dot int 64, this is nothing but equal to int 4 in ABAP. Int 4 in ABAP is equal to int 64 bit in OData service. Why? Because in ABAP terminology, int 4 is nothing but int 4 byte here. That is nothing but equal to int 64, that is bit here in OData. So that is 4 bytes. 4 bytes is nothing but 64 bits here. 4 bytes, sorry, not this one, 4 edge 32, so let me take 32 here. So 4 bytes, each byte is equal to 8 bits. So that's the reason why we are getting 32 here. So I mean to say int 4 in ABAP. Int 4 in ABAP is nothing but that is int 4 byte. And int 32 in OData, that is nothing but 32 bit. So don't get confused here. So 4 bytes in ABAP is nothing but 32 bit in OData. Why? Because each byte is equal to 8 bits. Each byte equal to 8 bits. So that's the reason why you'll get the equivalent format as 32 bit. So please remember this. Okay, let me just write a simple note, may help you. So EDM dot something like int 32. That is nothing but int 4 in ABAP. So please remember this, because in general terms EDM dot int 32 is 32 bit here. Remember that. And that is nothing but equal to int 4, that is nothing but 4 byte here. So that is nothing but 32 bits. It is nothing but equal to 4 into 8, because each byte contains 8 bits. So it's almost same now. Each byte is equal to 8 bits, so now it becomes 32 equivalent data type. So now let me proceed further here. I'm just trying to use int 32. You can save it now. You can save it. So let me write those steps here. I've created salary as new input parameter for EMP by country function import. So let me write the steps here. Open EMP by country function import and choose function import parameters. Choose function import parameters and add new input parameter, that is nothing but salary with EDM dot int 32 data type. So this is a new input parameter we are adding here. Country is already available, so I'm adding a new attribute salary with EDM dot int 32 data type. So you will get it like this. Now what you need to do. So in order to handle these multiple function imports, you have to go to data provider extension class. And before that, it is better to regenerate your runtime objects, because I've added one more function import. Generate, or I can say regenerate runtime objects and open data provider extension class and open execute action method and change the code accordingly. You have to change the code accordingly. In the last class, we have implemented some piece of code. Now we can change that code by opening that execute underscore action method. Whenever you handle function imports, you have to use execute action method. So let me go to that. So you can see now, I'm going to execute action method. Execute action method. So in the last class, we have implemented some piece of code. This is a code we have implemented for EMP by country. Now what we can do is we can add one more work area. For example, work area underscore parameter. You can use like type slash IWBEP slash S underscore MGW name value pair. Name value pair. I've taken second work area. You can write code in different ways, but I'm using this technique. I'm declaring second work area for second input parameter. And what you can do is here, you can add one more line, read table, IT parameter into work area parameter 2 with key name which is matching with, for example, salary. Key name which is matching with salary. So country is one of the input, salary is another input. And according to this, now you can change your where clause where country equal to and. You can use and salary equal to. Salary equal to something like work area parameter 2, work area parameter 2 hyphen its value. So that is the approach you have to follow. There are many ways of writing the code, but I'll show some path. I'll show some technique. You can try with other techniques as well if you're good at Core ABAP. So we are using country and salary in the where clause by capturing the input 1 from IT parameter, input 2 also from IT parameter. IT parameter contains input 1, input 2 of your function import. So accordingly, after executing this entire code, the records will come to ITAB. The records will come to ITAB and ITAB records will be transferred to ER data. ITAB records will be ultimately transferred to ER data. And as I told you, ER data will send the output records to the front end. ER data will send the output records to front end if you are writing the code in execute action method. So you can activate now and let us test it. So let me go back and go to gateway client because service is already registered. Now let us use like EMP by country. Question mark country equal to, for example, India, and country is one of the input here. And when you want to pass one more parameter as input to this function import, you can use ampersand here. Ampersand salary equal to, for example, 60,000. So let me try, but before trying that, let me remove this cache from both the systems. After removing the metadata cache, then you can run this. You can run this and you can see now we are getting a single record with country India and salary matching with 60,000 here. Only single record is available. But the main intention of this example is to make you understand how to pass multiple inputs to function import. How to pass multiple inputs to function import, that is my main intention. If I change this value, for example, country equal to India and salary equal to 30,000, let me check here. You can see there is one more record. Country India, salary 30,000. So we are able to get that. And just let me put a breakpoint here to understand what exactly is happening in the background. So you can see now, I'm just going to DPC extension class. One second. Mukund, your audio is not enabled. Rohit, I told you several times, but you are not following it. Okay, let me proceed now. You can see here, so you can see here something like execute underscore action. Okay, if you are able to hear me, then it's okay. So I'm going to execute action. Let me put a breakpoint here. So let me just put a breakpoint somewhere on select query. Just enable that breakpoint. And let me execute this again. Country equal to India and salary equal to, for example, 60,000. So the framework or the server will stop the execution at that breakpoint. Server will stop the execution on breakpoint and it will open ABAP debugger. You can see that. It opens ABAP debugger, and my main intention is I want to know what exactly is coming to IT parameter here. I want to know what is coming to IT parameter. So you can go to tables here and you can provide something like IT underscore parameter. So you can see now. So that is how the framework will capture our input values. Country equal to India and salary equal to 60,000. So our framework is able to capture our input parameters of a function by using IT parameter. So our function import can have any number of inputs here. So every input parameter value will come to IT parameter of execute action method. So let me write a simple note here. First let me copy this code. So IT underscore parameter is responsible for capturing all input parameters of function import. IT parameter is responsible for capturing all input parameters of your function import. So don't forget that. Function import can have one or many, but everything will come to IT parameter. So that is what you can check when debugger is opened here. You can see that. And when I press F here, it will come out of that and it will display that output record here. You can see that. So Vijay is one of the record which is matching that criteria. Now let us understand how to add one more function import within the same service. I want to use one more function import within the same service. So first of all, let me complete this. Activate DPC extension class. Open gateway client and test the service with below syntax. Test the service with below syntax, and let me copy this to you. So you can test it with this one. This is a common path. Up to service it is a common path. Just use this here. And don't forget multiple input parameter values to function import. Then use ampersand. Just use ampersand. Now let us understand how to add one more function import. I want to add one more function import, for example, for getting the list of flights based on the airline. I want to add one more function import to get list of flights based on airline. So what you can do now? So let me go back. And here, first of all, you need to create one entity type, entity set. That's a very common story. Within the same service, I can create multiple entity types, multiple entity sets. Within the same service, I can create multiple entity types, multiple entity sets. So under data model, you can import the fields from DDIC structure for creating another entity type and another entity set. For example, flight. And DDIC structure, I'm using BAPI SFL-DAT. So along with entity type, I want to create entity set. Entity type along with entity set. So you can click on next button and you can choose the required fields here. You can choose the required fields whichever you want and then click on next. and you can choose here something like one of the field as key field that is compulsory inside entity type. I made airline ID as key field. So now we have two entity types and two entity sets in the same service. Now we can see there are two entity types and two entity sets within the same service. So first of all, let me write these steps. Just putting some side heading so that you can understand. Now what we are trying to do, we are trying to use multiple function imports in a single service now. So first what you do is open the existing service. Open the existing service, then right click data model. You can right click data model, then import DDIC structure. Provide entity type equal to flight. DDIC structure, for example, equal to BAPI SFLDAT BAPI SFLDAT, and then choose create entity set. Then click on next here, then choose the required fields, and continue, and choose airline ID as key field. Choose airline ID as key field and click on finish. So with this we have created entity type and entity set. We have created entity type, entity set. So now already there is a function import. Why can't we add one more function import? So it's very simple. Just try to right click data model and create one more function import here. You can right click and create one more function import. For example, this is flights by airline ID. I'm using this as flights by airline ID. That's a function import. That's a function import we are using. Flights by airline ID, then click on continue. So let me provide that. Right click data model, create function import. Right click data model, then create function import. Provide function import name equal to flights by airline ID. I'm using flights by airline ID. Then save it. Now, as I told you, every function import contains two options, input configuration and output configuration. Every function import contains two options. One is input configuration, another is output configuration. In configuration, output configuration. So let us do that now. You can double click function import parameter and you can add one function import parameter, for example, airline ID. For example, I am using airline ID. Or you can use airline, whatever, it doesn't matter. And I want to use this as EDM.string data type. I'm using this as EDM.string data type. You can save it. So let me write this step. So double click flights by airline ID function import parameters and define input parameter, that is airline with data type EDM.string I'm using. Airline with data type we are using EDM.string. Then we need to configure, you have to define output configuration. You have to define output configuration. Input configuration is airline. Output configuration, you need to define that fields from the entity type. You have to define the entity set, whether you want to fetch the data or send the data, what is the cardinality, everything you have to define, which I explained in the last class. Every function import will have its own output configuration. Every function import contains its own output configuration. So after saving, just try to double click. You have to double click your flights by airline ID, that is a function import name. And here we can select something like entity type. And what is the entity type? Our entity type is flight, so you can choose that. If you choose flight, it will collect the output fields from this entity type. It will collect output fields from this entity type. And I can expect 0, 1 or many records as output, so you can use 0 to n. I can expect 0, 1 or many output records, so you can use 0 to n cardinality. And what should be the entity set? What is the entity set you have created? So you have to choose that. That is flight set. So the records will be transferred to the front end internally using this entity set. The records will be transferred to front end internally using this entity set. So what is the entity set we have created? Flight set is the entity set. So you can choose that. And I want to fetch the data, so you can use get operation here. To fetch the data, you can use get operation here. So with this particular configuration, you can easily understand how exactly, with this configuration, you might have understood how to use multiple function imports, and each function import has its own output configuration. We can have multiple function imports, and each function import will have each function import will have its own output configuration. That is the point. So let us configure all those things. Choose airline by ID. That is the function import name. And provide return type kind equal to flight, then provide return entity type. This is entity type, and the entity type name is flight. Then after that, you have to provide cardinality. Provide cardinality, for example, 0 to n, and provide entity set name. Entity set name, that is flight set, and provide HTTP method. For fetching the data, you can use get operation, then save it. So all these things comes under output configuration, and each function contains a separate output configuration. So after doing this, just open data provider extension class. You can open data provider extension class. Then open execute underscore action method. You can open execute underscore action method. And implement the below code. Implement below code. So let me go to that. You can save it. After saving, you can regenerate. After saving, you can regenerate your runtime classes. Then you can go to DPC extension class. You can go to DPC extension class and just try to double click execute action method. Double click execute action method, and you can add some more lines of code. So you can see now so now you can see here we can make use of one more function import. EMP by country is one function import. We need to add one more function import here. So what we can do is we can add one more here, but before adding, I want to add one option here, that is flights itab, flights internal table I want to declare here. Flights internal table I want to declare explicitly by using type ZCL model provider class, and you can refer to table type flight. TT underscore flight, that is a table type. So I've declared one more internal table with table type as flight. And I want to take one more option here like airline. You can use airline ID. You can use like type, something like ZCL underscore model provider class, and you can use your table structure flight hyphen airline ID. Table structure hyphen that airline ID field. So after declaring these things, what you can do is you can add one more function import in between case and end case. In between case and end case, so I can add one more when flights by airline ID is triggered. I want to use read table statement here, something like IT parameter into something like work area parameter with key name, but that key name is nothing but your input field name, that is equal to airline. What we have provided as input, let me check here. So we have provided airline as a input parameter under input configuration. So try to use the same name when you're writing the code here. And you can pass work area underscore parameter hyphen value. You can pass it to airline. That is nothing but this one, airline ID. You can pass it to airline ID, but this is an extra line. You can do it in shortcut manner also, but the main point here is I need to call the BAPI here. I want to call a BAPI so that it will fetch flight record. So you can just call function statement. And you can call your BAPI flight get list here. You can call a BAPI, that is BAPI flight get list. And you can use exporting something like airline equal to, you can pass this here, airline equal to some airline ID. And I want to get the output records from tables. From tables I can get output records. So you can use flight list equal to flights itab. So we are passing the input as airline ID and we are getting output records into flights itab. So airline ID is the input for BAPI, flights itab is the output from the BAPI. Airline ID is the input to the BAPI, flights itab is the output from the BAPI. And what you can do is now, if you want to send these records to the front end, if you want to send flights itab records to front end, then directly you can use copy data to reference. And you can call exporting. Exporting IS data equal to flights itab. That means this we have to pass it. That is a source changing CR data equal to ER data. CR data equal to ER data. So finally the records will go to the front end because of ER data parameter. Finally, the output records will go to the front end because of ER data. So that I've already explained in the last class. So from the source, according to this particular code, I can say flight SciTab is the source. This is your source, and target is ER data. So from source internal table, we are copying to the standard parameter ER data, which will send our output records to the front end. You have to copy here from your source to target. You have to copy the records from source to target, and ER data will send the records to the front end. So that is what happens here. Records will go to the front end, like Sap Ui5 or whatever. So this is the overall functionality we have written in today's class. So in that way, we can handle multiple function imports by using execute action method. Execute action is a method. It can handle any number of function imports. Just you need to use case end case by capturing the function name with, you can capture the function name by using IV action name. IV action name is a standard parameter. It will capture which function is triggered from the front end. IV action name will capture the function triggered from the front end. You may trigger employee by country, you may trigger airline by airline ID, whatever function that is going to be captured by the framework using IV action name, which is a standard parameter here. So you can implement this complete code. So this is a final version. Let me copy that. Implement the below code. Activate DPC extension class. Open gateway client and test the service with below syntax. So let me activate now. Go back. Gateway client. So our function name you have to provide. Function name is flights. Let me check what's the function name. Flights by airline ID is the function name. So you can provide that here. Provide function name, that is flights by airline ID, question mark, airline equal to, for example, LH. LH, that is Lufthansa. But before executing, better to clean up metadata cache from both systems. The service is modified, metadata might got changed, so better to clean up the cache before executing this service. Function name, input parameter equal to value, so let me test it here. Now you can see it is able to get the data based on airline ID as LH. There are several records with airline ID LH, so it is able to get that. So now say for example, if I provide UA United Airlines, so then you can see that record, United Airlines. UA United Airlines. So there are several records. AA American Airlines. So function import is successfully executed and you're getting those records. Something like that. So whichever records are matching with that criteria, it will open those records in this HTTP response. So this is how you need to test it. Just test like this. But in the same service, I can also execute another function import to test other functions. You can use like this, /emp by country. You can use that also in the same service. So in this way also you can test it. So now I want to know what exactly, which function is triggered, and I want to trace out through debugging. I want to trace out by using a debugging technique here. So just let me go to DPC extension. And you can see here there is execute action method. So I just want to show you the purpose of IV action name. I want to show you the purpose of IV action name. So let us put a breakpoint and let us execute the service now. Flights by airline ID I'm using. So you can see now service will stop the execution on breakpoint. I kept a breakpoint just to understand which function import is triggered, and I want to trace the purpose of IV action name. So in our gateway client we have used flights by airline ID, and that value will come to this IV action name here. You can see that IV action name, and you can see that somewhere. That is how you can trace out. So under debugging, IV action name contains flights by airline ID. So that is how you can improve your knowledge, by putting a breakpoint, by tracing the values of each parameter. And let me execute here. So after executing, you'll get those records, flights records. But I want to change the function now. Service is same, service is same, but I want to execute another function, employee by country here. Question mark. Country equal to, for example, India, ampersand salary equal to something like 60,000. 6,000 I have provided, so you can see here I want to know IV action name. So IV action name is able to capture that now. IV action name, it is able to capture EMP by country. So that is a function import triggered from the gateway client. So you can easily trace out under debugging. So you can press F8. There are no records. So if I use 60,000, then you will get the record. Country India, salary 60,000. So it is running that service and it is triggering EMP by country. And when you press F8, so that record is available and it will display here. So debugging will help you to trace out what is the input coming and which input parameter, which output parameter is used by the framework. So that will help you in debugging. That will help you to understand when you put a breakpoint and when you do debugging. So that's how you can test it. So what I mean to say here is IV underscore action underscore name, IV underscore action underscore name is the standard parameter responsible for capturing the function import name triggered from front end. IV action name is a standard parameter responsible for capturing the function import name which is triggered from the front end app. And most importantly, I can say execute underscore action is the standard method. Execute underscore action is a standard method responsible for implementing one or more function imports or one or more functions. Execute action is a standard method responsible for implementing one or more functions of a service. So better to know all these points. So if you have any doubts, I'll clarify now. I'll come one by one. Yeah, Venkat, Vanaparthi.
No doubts.
Okay, no doubts. Then Venkat.
No doubts, sir.